Arcos Station trembled as the massive Vrexian warship locked into position outside its observation deck. Commander Alara Kane stood unblinking, her weathered face illuminated by the harsh glow of alien weapon systems powering up. Behind her, the station's crew held their breath. "Final warning. Human enclave," the transmission crackled. "Your species has been judged. Surrender your remaining outposts for processing or face immediate extinction." The voice belonged to High Marshal Quarax, Supreme Commander of the Galactic Hegemony's 17th Subjugation Fleet. His gnarled visage filled the main view screen, mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his kind. Ilara allowed herself the slightest smile. "High Marshal, perhaps before you destroy us, you'd care for a game?" The alien's compound eyes narrowed. The hegemony's obsession with strategic games was legendary. They judged species' worthiness by their ability to think tactically. 17. Civilizations had already fallen under their rule, each failing the hegemony's ultimate test. "You propose a challenge?" Quarax's translator struggled with his incredulous tone. "One match, your best player against ours." Ilara's voice remained steady despite the tremor in her hands. "If we win, Earth and her colonies remain independent." Laughter erupted from the alien commander. "And when you lose?" "Then we submit without further resistance." The station fell silent. Behind Ilara, her second-in-command, Lieutenant Prax Doro, shot her a concerned glance. They both knew Earth's defense fleets had been decimated months ago. This desperate gambit was humanity's last card to play. "Agreed," Quarax finally responded. "We shall test your species' strategic capacity. Our champion, Grand Tactician Vrel, has never been defeated." The transmission ended abruptly. Ilara turned to face her crew. "Commander," Prax whispered, "are you certain about this? What player could possibly—" "Not what, Lieutenant?" "Who?" Ilara pulled up a secured transmission channel on her wrist interface. "Get me Naveen Kaito. Immediately." 8 light-years away on Europa base, Naveen Kaito lived in self-imposed isolation. Once considered Earth's greatest strategic mind, he'd retreated from public life after the disaster on Mars colony. For 5 years, he'd played against only one opponent, an ancient AI chess program that he'd modified to create increasingly impossible scenarios. When Ilara's message arrived, Naveen was locked in his usual routine: 3 simultaneous games. Against his AI, each representing a different tactical scenario. He hadn't spoken to another human in months. "The fate of humanity rests on a board game?" he asked, his voice rusty from disuse. "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious," Ilara replied. "The hegemony values strategic thinking above all. Their society revolves around it. This isn't just chess, Naveen. It's their sacred evaluation ritual." "And if I refuse?" "Then we all die anyway," she said simply. "At least this way, we have a chance." Naveen closed his eyes. The weight of billions of lives pressed against his consciousness. The memories of Mars, the failed defense strategy that cost thousands their lives, threatened to overwhelm him. "I'll need to know everything about their game. Rules, past matches, how they think." "You'll have it all," Ilara promised. "A transport is already en route to Europa." As the communication ended, Naveen glanced at his 3 chess games, each in an impossible position. Yet in each one, victory was exactly 1 move away. If only he could see it. 1 move, the fate of humanity. 1 final game. Naveen Kaito had not left Europa base in 5 years, but now he stood aboard the stealth transport Hermes, studying everything known about the Vrexian game called Ket Ara. The holographic display showed a complex 3-dimensional board with hundreds of pieces, each with unique movement patterns and strategic values. "It's like chess mixed with Go, but with a 4th-dimensional component," explained Dr. Imara Wells, Earth's foremost xenoculture specialist. "The hegemony has used variations of this game to judge species for millennia." Naveen nodded silently, his dark eyes tracking piece movements from previous matches. 17 civilizations had played. 17 had lost. What happens to the losers? He asked quietly. Imara's expression darkened. The hegemony doesn't believe in genocide. Not exactly. They preserve what they call strategic value, infrastructure, technology, genetic material. But autonomy, culture, identity, those disappear. The Hermes shuddered as it dropped out of FTL travel. Arco's station loomed ahead, the massive Rexian flagship dwarfing it like a predator ready to swallow its prey. Commander Ilara met them in the docking bay. Our intelligence suggests their champion, Vrel, was genetically engineered for strategic thinking. His neural pathways are optimized. For Khetara. Wonderful, Naveen murmured. I'm up against an alien chess computer. You're Earth's best hope, Ilara insisted. Your unconventional approaches got people killed on Mars, Naveen interrupted sharply. The memory of that failed defense still haunted him. His innovative strategy had initially pushed back the hegemony scouts, but ultimately created a fatal vulnerability. That wasn't your fault, Ilara said softly. Military command altered your plans without consulting you. Naveen's bitter reply was cut short by the station's alert system. The Vrexians were hailing them. High Marshal Quarax's face filled the view screen. We have arrived at the appointed time. Present your champion. Ilara stepped forward. This is Naveen Kato, Earth's foremost strategic mind. The alien studied Naveen with compound eyes that betrayed no emotion. He does not appear impressive. For a final hope. Naveen met the alien's gaze. Neither did your scout ships before they destroyed our Neptune outpost. Appearances mean little. A clicking sound emerged from Quarax, possibly laughter. You show spirit. It will make your defeat more satisfying. The screen split to reveal another Vrexian, more slender but with enlarged cranial features. Grand. Tactician Vrel awaits. The match begins in one planetary rotation. After the transmission ended, Naveen returned to his temporary quarters to study. Hour after hour, he absorbed everything about Khetara, analyzing recorded matches, noting patterns. In Vrexian play, deep into station night, Prax Doro entered with a nutrient pack. You should rest. Can't, Naveen replied without looking up. Still trying to understand their endgame philosophy. Prax hesitated. Is it true what they say? That you haven't lost a strategic game since you were 12? Naveen finally looked up, exhaustion evident on his face. I lost the most important game of all on Mars. That wasn't a game. It's all games, Naveen whispered. Different boards, different stakes, but always the same principles. He pointed to a holographic replay of a Khetara match. Look here. The Vrexians always sacrifice short-term advantages for positional dominance. They think in terms of stellar cycles, not individual moves. And how do you think? Prax asked. Naveen's eyes reflected the glow of the hologram. I think about the move they never expect you to make. The chamber prepared for the match resembled a hybrid of amphitheater and temple. At its center floated the Khetara board, a three-dimensional grid comprised of transparent, crystalline platforms arranged in geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. Spectators from both species gathered, the station's human crew on one side, Vrexian officers on the other. Between them stood a neutral party, an ancient mechanical entity called the Arbiter, brought by the Vrexians to ensure fairness. The Arbiter has overseen 17 judgment games, Ilara explained to Naveen as they approached. It's supposedly incorruptible. Nothing is incorruptible, Naveen replied quietly, studying the machine. Everything has patterns, weaknesses. The Arbiter's metallic voice resonated through the chamber. The judgment game of Ket Ara will commence. The stakes, independence or submission of the human species. Grand tactician Vrel entered from the opposite side. The Vrexian moved with uncanny grace, its elongated limbs carrying it toward the board in perfect balance. Its enlarged cranium pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, a sign of cognitive activity. Among its kind. "I have studied your species' strategic games," Vrel announced, its translator rendering the clicks and whistles into flat English. "Primitive, but occasionally insightful. Your chess shows rudimentary understanding of positional advantage." Naveen said nothing, taking his position opposite the alien. Up close, he could see that Vrel's eyes weren't compound like other Vrexians. They were modified, with pupils that adjusted like camera apertures. "The challenger species moves first," the arbiter announced. Naveen studied the board. 218 pieces, each with unique movement patterns across multiple dimensions. He'd memorized the rules, but facing the actual game was different. The pieces seemed to shimmer, their positions subtly more complex than in the simulations. His first move was conservative, a development of a piece the Vrexians called the Pathfinder. Vrel responded instantly, as if anticipating this opening. 3 hours later, they remained locked in the opening phase. Humans watching couldn't follow the strategic depth, but the Vrexians clicked excitedly as complex patterns emerged across the board's multiple levels. "The human plays cautiously," High Marshal Quarax observed from his viewing platform. "Not cautiously," Alara replied, eyes fixed on Naveen. "Methodically." By the 6th hour, Naveen had established a defensive formation that puzzled the Vrexian observers. It wasn't optimal by their standards. It sacrificed control of key intersections and left vulnerabilities at the quantum layer of the board. "Your strategy is flawed," Vrel finally stated, mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "You have created 7 distinct weaknesses in your position." Naveen looked up from the board for the first time. "Or perhaps I see something you don't." "Impossible. I was engineered for perfect strategic vision." "That's your first mistake," Naveen replied, moving a piece that appeared to expose his central formation further. "Perfect vision sees what is. Strategic genius sees what could be." The game accelerated. Vrel launched a comprehensive attack, precisely targeting the weaknesses in Naveen's position. Pieces were captured on multiple levels of the board. The Vrexian spectators began making sounds of satisfaction. But something strange was happening. Each capture seemed to spring a trap, leading Vrel's pieces into increasingly complex positional disadvantages. "Understand this," Naveen said as Vrel paused to recalculate. "Humans don't play to avoid losing. We play to win, even against impossible odds." By the 12th hour, neither player had taken a break. The board had transformed into a bewildering array of interconnected threats and counters. Even the arbiter seemed to be processing the positions more slowly. Then Naveen made a move that caused absolute silence in the chamber. He sacrificed his equivalent of a queen, a catastrophic blunder by all appearances. "You concede?" Vrel asked. "Mandibles quivering." "No," Naveen replied, his eyes clear despite the exhaustion. "I accelerate." "Incomprehensible," muttered Grand Tactician Vrel, compound eyes dilating as they scanned the board for the 18th time. 14 hours into the match, the Ket Ara board had evolved into a configuration no Vrexian had ever witnessed. Naveen's sacrifice had not been a blunder. It had been the key that unlocked a completely novel approach to the game, one that defied the strategic doctrines the hegemony had refined over thousands of years. "Your move," Naveen reminded him, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. The human showed signs of physical fatigue. Bloodshot eyes, trembling hands, but his mind remained razor-sharp. His strategy had transformed the traditionally positional game of Ket Ara into something chaotic and fluid. Where Vrexians valued controlled space and predictable patterns, Naveen had created dynamic imbalances across all levels of the board. High Marshal Quarax leaned forward on his observation platform, mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of agitation. "This is unprecedented," he whispered to his adjutant. "The human plays as if reading from a different rule book." In the human observation area, Commander Alara maintained her composure, but her eyes betrayed growing hope. Dr. Imara Wells frantically recorded every move, recognizing the historical significance of what was unfolding. Vrel finally moved, capturing a seemingly critical piece. The Vrexian spectators clicked in approval. Naveen responded instantly, as if he'd anticipated this exact move. His counter opened up the quantum level of the board, creating connections between pieces that had appeared unrelated. "What you call weakness," Naveen explained, his fingers hovering over a piece. "We call opportunity." He completed his move, a subtle repositioning that seemed inconsequential. Vrel's bioluminescent cranium pulsed rapidly, the equivalent of a Vrexian frown. "Your position remains compromised in 6 dimensions, but dominant in the 7th, Naveen countered, the dimension you've been trained to ignore. The game continued for another 2 hours. The Arbiter occasionally intervened to clarify rules when Naveen's unconventional approach stretched the boundaries of traditional play. Each time, after careful calculation, the ancient machine confirmed the validity of the human's moves. Halfway through the 16th hour, Vrel's confident demeanor changed. The Vrexian began taking longer between moves, its cranial luminescence flickering in patterns that suggested cognitive stress. "Your strategy defies orthodox Ketara principles," Vrel finally stated, mandibles clicking rapidly. "It creates unpredictability." "That's humanity's speciality," Naveen replied. "We thrive in chaos. Evolution taught us that survival doesn't belong to the strongest or smartest, but to those most responsive to change." The game entered a critical phase. Naveen had sacrificed material advantage to create a web of interlocking threats that spanned all levels of the board. Traditional strategic evaluation would judge his position inferior, but the dynamic potential energy he'd built up was impossible to calculate. Vrel made a decisive move, committing to an aggressive push that would, by all Vrexian strategic doctrine, secure victory within 10 moves. Naveen closed his eyes momentarily. When he opened them, a hint of a smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That's what I was waiting for." His counter-move was subtle. A piece shifted diagonally across the quantum layer. The implications weren't immediately obvious even to, the observing Vrexians. But 3 moves later, the devastating consequences became clear. Vrel's attack had been transformed into a trap. The Vrexians' pieces, optimized for offense, now found themselves in a cascade of forced moves. Each defensive response only worsened the position. "Impossible," Vrel whispered, cranial lights pulsing erratically. "The strategic matrices don't allow for this outcome." "That's the difference between us," Naveen said softly. "You play by matrices. We play by instinct, by imagination. We see possibilities where equations see none." The 18th hour began with Vrel's position collapsing across multiple dimensions of the board. The Vrexian spectators had fallen silent, while the humans watched with held breath, not daring to hope yet. High Marshal Quarax stood abruptly, his imposing figure casting a shadow across the chamber. "This game is not proceeding according to established patterns." "No," Commander Alara agreed, matching his stance. "It's proceeding according to human patterns." As the 20th hour of play began, the atmosphere in the chamber had transformed. What had started as a ritual of dominance, another species to be judged and found wanting, had become something unprecedented in the hegemony's long history. High Marshal Quarax no longer sat with regal detachment. He stood at the edge of his platform, mandibles clicking continuously, eyes fixed on the board. Around him, Vrexian officers whispered urgently into communication devices, transmitting updates to the Hegemony Council. Vrel's once perfect posture had deteriorated. The Grand Tactician hunched over the board, cranial luminescence flickering in patterns that translated to extreme stress in Vrexian physiology. "Your move," Naveen reminded him again, his voice quieter, but no less intense than hours before. Vrel's appendage hovered over the board for 9 full minutes before selecting a piece. "This configuration should not be possible," the alien finally said. "Our strategic models predict 18 advantageous outcomes from the original game state, yet you have created a 19th path." Naveen nodded slightly. 18 civilizations, 18 defeats, each playing by your rules, trying to beat you at a game you designed. He moved a piece that appeared insignificant, a minor unit shifting between dimensional planes. "Humanity learned something valuable from our earliest conflicts. Never fight the battle your enemy has prepared for." 3 more moves exchanged. Vrel's defense grew increasingly desperate as the elegant trap Naveen had constructed over 20 hours began to close. The Arbiter, that ancient mechanical judge, emitted a series of tones that indicated something unprecedented was occurring. "This match has exceeded all recorded strategic complexity parameters," it announced. "The outcome probability matrix is recalculating." Commander Alara leaned toward Dr. Wells. "What's happening?" "I think," Wells whispered. "The Arbiter itself is struggling to evaluate the position. Naveen has created something beyond its predictive capacity." At the 22nd hour, Vrel made a critical error. Not from lack of skill, but from the impossible pressure of Naveen's unorthodox strategy. A key defensive piece moved one plane too far, breaking the connection with its supporting structure. Naveen didn't pounce immediately. Instead, he paused, studying not the board, but his opponent. "You're wondering how this happened," he said softly. "How a species with a fraction of your history could challenge your strategic dominance." Vrel's translator struggled to convey the complexity of the alien's response. "Your approach violates fundamental maxims of strategic efficiency." "Exactly," Naveen replied. "Efficiency is predictable. Predictability can be defeated." He gestured to the board between them. "This game reveals the fundamental flaw in the hegemony's judgment system. You test species on their ability to play by rules you've mastered over millennia. You don't test their ability to transform those rules." High Marshal Korax approached the playing area. "Violation protocol be damned." "What are you saying, human?" "I'm saying," Naveen answered, never taking his eyes off the board, "that your 17 victories weren't tests of strategic superiority. They were tests of conformity. You didn't defeat those civilizations because you were better. You defeated them because they tried to beat you at your own game." The chamber fell silent as Naveen finally moved, exploiting the weakness in Vrel's position. The move created a cascade effect across multiple dimensions of the board, collapsing entire structures of the Vrexians' defenses. The Arbiter's mechanical voice broke the silence. "Warning! Terminal position approaching. Grand Tactician Vrel's. Defeat can be projected in 7 moves with 99.8% certainty." Vrel's appendages trembled visibly as the alien examined the board one final time. Then, in a gesture that translated across species barriers, the Grand Tactician lowered its central eye stalks, the Vrexian equivalent of closing one's eyes in defeat. "I concede," Vrel announced, the translator unable to fully capture the complex emotions in the alien's voice. "The human victory is undeniable." The human observers erupted in shocked celebration, but Naveen remained motionless, his eyes still fixed on the board. "No," he said, causing the room to quiet again. "I don't accept your concession." Even the Vrexians seemed confused by this response. I want to play to completion, Naveen continued, his voice gaining strength. I want the record to show exactly how this ended. Not just that humanity won, but how we won. The galaxy needs to understand. The final moves of the game unfolded with ceremonial precision. Naveen methodically closed the elegant trap he had constructed over 24 hours of play. Each move illuminated the revolutionary strategy he had employed, not just beating the Rexians, but fundamentally challenging their conception of strategic thought. When the final piece clicked into position, the Arbiter's ancient systems emitted a tone never before heard in its thousands of years of judging contests. Match concluded, it announced. Human victory achieved through novel strategic paradigm classification alpha. This outcome has been recorded for transmission to all hegemony worlds. The chamber remained utterly silent. The human crew, despite their earlier jubilation, now watched in solemn awareness of the historical significance of this moment. The Vrexians stood motionless, their rigid social hierarchy temporarily paralyzed by an outcome their civilization had never contemplated. High Marshal Quarax approached the center of the chamber, towering over Naveen, who remained seated. Exhaustion, finally claiming its toll. The terms of our agreement are clear, the Vrexian commander stated. Humanity retains its independence. We will withdraw our subjugation fleet. Commander Alara stepped forward. Those were the terms, yes. But before you leave, you should understand what happened here today. We understand, Quarax replied, mandibles clicking slowly. Your champion employed unorthodox tactics that exploited unforeseen vulnerabilities in traditional Ket-Ara strategy. No, Naveen said, rising unsteadily to his feet. What happened today wasn't about a game. It was about a philosophy. He gestured toward the complex board between them. For millennia, your hegemony has judged species based on their ability to operate within your framework of understanding. You've mistaken conformity for inferiority. Naveen walked slowly around the board, indicating key positions with a trembling hand. Every move I made violated your strategic doctrine not because I didn't understand it, but because I chose to transcend it. Humanity doesn't survive by following established patterns. We survive by breaking them when necessary, by seeing possibilities where others see only rules. The Vrexian officers shifted uncomfortably, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic glow of the board. Consider this not just a defeat, Ilara continued where Naveen left off, but a warning. Humanity will defend itself not by matching your strength, but by changing the nature of the conflict. Every species you've subjugated approached the challenge as you expected them to. We never will. High Marshal Quarax stood silent for several moments, his alien features unreadable to human eyes. Then he performed a gesture none of the humans recognized, extending all 4 upper limbs in a pattern that seemed almost reverential. In 17 judgment games across 8,000 cycles, no species has demonstrated such adaptation, the Marshal said. The Hegemony Council will need to reconsider fundamental assumptions. Tell them this, Naveen said, his voice growing stronger despite his physical exhaustion. Earth does not wish for conflict. We would prefer alliance, exchange, mutual growth. But if threatened again, know that what you witnessed today was merely the opening move in humanity's strategic repertoire. The Arbiter, its ancient systems still processing the game's unprecedented outcome, emitted a final pronouncement. Match significance classified. Paradigm-altering event. Recommendation to A. Hegemony Council. Strategic Reassessment Priority Alpha. 3 days later, from the observation deck of Arco's station, Commander Ilara Kane and Naveen Cato watched the massive Vrexian war fleet disengage from orbit. The enormous ships, built for conquest across thousands of years, moved into formation and accelerated away from Earth space. They'll be back, Naveen said quietly. Not as conquerors, perhaps, but they'll return. We've become too interesting to ignore. Ilara nodded. When they do, we'll be ready. The whole system is already studying. Your game. Every colony, every outpost, they're calling it the Kaido Defense. Naveen winced at the name. It wasn't a defense. It was a conversation. A conversation? Yes, he replied, watching the last Vrexian ship disappear into the darkness of space. Every strategic contest is fundamentally a dialogue. For millennia, the hegemony has been asking the same question. We're the first species that didn't give them the answer they expected. As the final ship vanished from sensors, a transmission arrived from the departing Vrexian fleet. It contained no words, only a symbol. The Kadara board reconfigured into a pattern that, in Vrexian culture, represented new understanding. Ilara studied the symbol with curiosity. What do you think it means? Naveen smiled for the first time since the match ended. It means we've changed the game for everyone. Across the vastness of space, aboard the hegemony flagship, High Marshal Quarax composed his report to the Council. For the first time in his long career, the standard templates felt insufficient. After consideration, he added a personal addendum. Recommendation: reclassify humanity from assessment target to strategic anomaly. Approach with caution. This species does not defeat obstacles, they transform them. They do not overcome challenges, they reimagine them. In humanity, the hegemony has not found a worthy opponent. We have found a mirror reflecting our own limitations. The game is no longer the game. The end is one move away, but perhaps not the end we anticipated. For the first time in 8 millennia, the hegemony must consider the possibility that our path is not the only path to knowledge. In their victory, the humans have issued their warning. Challenge us at your peril, for we will not fight on your terms. We will change the very nature of the conflict. And in that warning, I have glimpsed something unexpected. Not the end of our expansion, but potentially the beginning of something far more significant, a true exchange between equals. The transmission was sent, accelerating across subspace toward the hegemony homeworld. As it traveled, other species throughout the galaxy received fragments of information about the unprecedented human victory. Something new had entered the galactic consciousness, a question no one had thought to ask before. What if the rules themselves could change?